Actually, I won't talk about that. I'm talking about that in my book now, which I haven't yet revealed to the world. Moving on. How much time do I have? I gotta wrap this up because I'm running out of battery life. Okay. Actually, I do talk about the intelligence process a little bit. I'm going to do 2 points and then I'll stop. A, at the bottom of page 2. So A underneath intelligence may mean 4 things. A, one should immediately recognize that in order for the raw information to have meaning, it must be contextualized within a larger geopolitical framework. The information isn't meaningful unless that raw information makes sense of existing geopolitical relationships. If that intelligence, if that, not even intelligence, it's not intelligence yet, if that raw information comes in and that raw information doesn't fit contextually into a greater systemic understanding of a snapshot of geopolitical relationships, then it has no significance. There is no meaning. So, for example, Dr. Campbell had a Snickers bar yesterday. So what? Who cares? That doesn't fit in. Dr. Campbell, this isn't true. I'm not worried about it, but Dr. Campbell met with this really suspect-looking dude, who knows a dude. You might want to check into that. Let me know who he knows, and who he knows, and who he knows. Why are they talking? Because that information might fit into a larger geopolitical framework. And thus, I erased it, thus this paternalistic vibe, like, oh, we're only spying on you to protect you, we don't, and then some people will say, I don't want you to do that. Well, I mean, we'll leave that debate for others. Geopolitical framework, which is presumably constantly changing. This geopolitical framework is constantly, I shouldn't even put in presumably, it is constantly changing. It is always changing. Based on my decisional nodes, I've selected A. Based on my assumption of decisional nodes, they can either select B or C. The likelihood is they'll select C. Insofar as they select C, it's because I infer that they will select C, why I select A. They do select C. It reinforces A, my system changes. They don't select C, they select B. It undermines my selection of A, my system changes. The system is perpetually in a state of change, but the structure for that change is not haphazard. There is a beautiful, beautiful branch of logical mathematics called non-monotonic logic, and there is a very well-groomed system for incorporating flux. It's beautiful. It's genius. And I've lectured on it. Thus, the significance of raw intelligence gathered may itself change as a relation, and I want to put link to my non-monotonic logic series here so that you guys can watch it if you want. I'll put link right here. Link to non-mono. And I present it really relatively basic so that you have a general understanding, and then, you know, you can go on and browse yourself and get more complex understanding. But the information that I presented was, I mean, for YouTube, it was pretty solid. It was pretty solid. And then I just explained the ABC murder case. I haven't looked at the freaking notes in 2 months. I love logic, because logic, you know, I was thinking logically then, I'm thinking logically now. I can anticipate my notes. I already discussed it. The ABC murder case is a case, as I said earlier, before I realized that I had already written this, based on the function of non-monotonic logic, which is new information changes the assumptions that we have. It gets more complex when we realize that new information is also going to have to change our inferences. That's a much, much deeper level. We need way more information before we can get there. And then lastly, before I pause, bottom of page 2b, note, not only is the raw information gathered context specific, not only is this raw information that's coming into the intelligence cycle, and thus the intelligence community, specific to maybe even individual human beings, but the meaning of the information, is itself context specific. This intel, this information, this raw information coming in about this specific dude is important because of his specific affiliations with other people, which are in the interest of the mission, or not, and thus the competing tension, right? Our mission is X another nation's interest, I don't think any other interest is specifically not X, so that there's a bona fide antithesis, but you can see the competition. Because what we find as ideological motivations for global action will invariably be, in some sense, not necessarily absolutely antithetical, but at least perceptually antithetical to another nation's interest. And this is the tension of global. This really is where IR takes its basis. International relations is based on a recognition of antithetical ideological affiliations, right? It's the at least perceived antithesis between the missions of sovereign nations that cause hostilities in the world. And international relations and diplomacy is specifically a mechanism of attempting to allow our diplomats and their diplomats to talk and to hash out some type of agreement, which I think is one of the greatest jobs. It has to be one of the greatest jobs on the planet. You literally are keeping the planet calm. Shout out to those people who have that job. That's an awesome job to have. So not only is the raw information gathered context specific, but the meaning of the information is itself context specific. Thus, context is absolutely important. Context is important. Context is important. Context is important for two reasons. Why? Context from raw information identifies particular human beings or particular situations, one. And two, context is specific because we recognize as a product of the deliverable, it is going to contextualize that raw information about that individual person or that individual location into a broader understanding of how it relates to the mission. I apologize if that came out too quick, but that should be clear, right? That is how it was gathered, by whom, who processed it, who will ultimately decide as policymakers what may be their individual interest in this information, intelligence, etc., 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 etc. Okay, so I'm well over the hour mark. I'm glad that my battery has stayed alive for an hour and 7 minutes. I'm going to pause this so that I can continue the next bit. So I'm going to pause right here. Okay, I changed my batteries. I'm at the top of page 3, intelligence is process. Alright, so I actually did, let me see, I think I actually did, yeah, I actually do go in and analyze the intelligence cycle specifically, but it's going to be much deeper than, not to say that what I did before was shallow. It's just that, you know, it's the first lecture series is the first lecture series, right? It's the first how many ever hours I devoted to national security affairs, and there's some stuff on the internet on NSA, National Security Affairs, but to my knowledge, mine was and is one of the first sort of rigorous, conceptual, organized lectures on the topic. It's not me freestyling it on, I mean everything's freestyle, but it's not me sort of ad hoc off the cuff just giving my personal commentary, my opinion on the matter. So the reason why I did the series initially was to facilitate a broader sort of global understanding of national security. Now what I want to do is to look, since this lecture series, the entirety of this lecture series is on one specific aspect of national security. So you can think of national security affairs as an overarching general theoretical paradigm, and within that theoretical paradigm, intelligence is a member of that set, the set being national security. We're going to look specifically on intelligence and its varying parts. I'm a philosopher by training, so within the overarching branch of philosophy, you have epistemology, you have ethics, and so on. Epistemology is one specific aspect of philosophy. Similarly, intelligence is one aspect of national security affairs, which is the focus of this entire series. Again, if you're still here with me, I want to thank you for sticking around, because we've gone through 2 pages and it took us an hour and 7 minutes to go through 2 pages. Not because I wanted it to be an hour plus to cover 2 pages.